From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Unyato.
Hello and welcome. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to review restrictions on interstate travel wants approval for domestic flights granted from June the 21st. Lagos State Government yet to decide whether or not to lift ban on religious gatherings as Kaduna State Government insists mosques and churches will remain shut. House of Representatives calls for scrapping of excess crude account, makes slight adjustments to medium-term expenditure framework. President Muhammadu Buhari promises to support re-election of Akinwumi Adesina as president of the Africa Development Bank. And 6 police officers charged for using excessive force in Atlanta as world leaders weigh in on George Floyd murder protests. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, World Bank lists immediate steps for countries to recover from the impact on COVID-19.
On sports news tonight, Super Eagles forward Victor Osimhen wins Lille Player of the Season award in the French Ligue 1.
And from Abuja, Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki vows not to leave ruling All Progressives Congress APC, says he is confident of triumph in spite of challenges. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says restrictions on interstate travel will be reviewed once approval for domestic flight is given from June the 21st. The national coordinator of the PTF, Dr. Sani Aliyu, maintains that if the airline operators are able to meet all the requirements for the reopening by the set date, then restrictions on interstate travel would need to be reviewed. He also gives further clarification on the guidelines for reopening of worship centers.
Members of the Presidential Task Force.
The chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 begins the day's briefing with highlights of Monday's announcement of the reopening of worship centers, as well as the extension of the restrictions on interstate travel.
The decisions of the President.
He speaks about how the task force will monitor the developments in the next 4 weeks.
As we have always maintained, the fight against this pandemic is not a joke. And because the science, data, and experiences that drive our national response are constantly evolving, we urge all citizens to religiously implement applicable guidelines at specific phases of the battle. It is also important to stress the fact that the Presidential Task Force shall continue to monitor the progress and keep the option of a review open should the need arise.
The national coordinator of the PTF speaks about when the ban on interstate travel will be lifted.
Aviation industry, 3 weeks to get ready. Anytime from the 21st of June, if they are ready, they will contact us and we'll give them the go-ahead. Once we give them the go-ahead, we will review interstate restrictions.
He also gives further clarifications on the guidelines for worship centers.
Churches to open from 5 a.m. and close by 8 p.m. For churches, each service should be for a maximum of an hour with an interval of 30 minutes in between services to allow time for disinfection. Mosques are to open 20 minutes before prayers and close 20 minutes after prayers. The total time for Friday prayers, including sermons, should not exceed an hour. Places of worship should plan, if possible, for separate entry and exit points. But it's also mandatory that they have to have measures to direct the flow of people to avoid crowding and breach of physical distancing rules.
Over 800 health workers in Nigeria have been infected with COVID-19 since its outbreak in February this year. The task force explains efforts to curtail the infection among healthcare workers.
We now have the third highest number of confirmed cases on the continent, just after South Africa and Egypt. It means that there's an added responsibility for us to work harder every day. We've had 812 healthcare workers infected. They're not just numbers. 29 of these work for the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. There are people I know. They have families, wives, children. About 8 of them right now are in the Edo Treatment Center.
We have conducted an analysis of healthcare worker infections and identified critical areas for targeted intervention to include continuous updates and retraining. More than 13,000 health workers have been trained, which will result in reduced rate of infection, especially infection in the line of duty.
The second phase of the ease of lockdown has a 4-week span. Further decision as to whether or not to completely relax all restrictions will highly depend on the feedbacks from this period.
Meanwhile, the Lagos State Government says churches and mosques may remain shut due to the rising number of coronavirus cases in the state. The State Commissioner for Home Affairs, Mr. Onoifu Elegushi, told Channels Television after the state ministerial press briefing that the state government is very concerned about the rising numbers and this will impact heavily on the reopening of worship centers.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen,
before the pronouncement, we are meeting, continuously with the religious leaders, with Safety Commission, discussing the possibility, which was ruled out at our last meeting. The issue of reopening cannot even come in place now, looking at the number accredited to Lagos in terms of affected patients in the state, in the country. So we ruled out the possibility of reopening. But now that the federal government made a pronouncement, as I said earlier, it is now left to the incident commander, Mr. Governor, to give further directives. But I believe that the figure, the increasing figure, is a major concern to government and also to the religious leaders.
On a brighter note, Lagos State has announced the recovery of 33 more COVID-19 patients and their discharge from its facilities. 7 of the 33 are females, 26 are male, including 3 foreigners. With this, the number of patients discharged from the isolation center now stands at 908. And over in Kaduna State, the government there says it has not authorized markets or places of worship to reopen. The state government says the decision, first taken in March 2020, has not changed and remains part of the quarantine orders against the spread of COVID-19 in the state. In a statement issued today by the special advisor to the state governor, Muyiwa Adekeye, it says the government is engaging business, community and religious leaders on the protocols for the safe opening of businesses, markets and the resumption of services in worship centers. Meanwhile, the Kaduna State is still maintaining the prohibition of interstate and intercity travel. And in that state, 15 more COVID-19 patients have been discharged, while the state government confirms 31 new cases. The state government says the cases were recorded in Zaria, Kaduna North and Sabongeri local government areas of the state. The state government also says it's anticipating a further rise as more tests are conducted. In the southeast, the Anambra State Governor Willie Obiano is threatening to shut markets and worship centers because of what he describes as the neglect of preventative protocols. The governor made his position known during a statewide broadcast where he announced the second fatality of COVID-19 in the state. Governor Obiano says the patient who is being treated for an ailment not related to COVID-19 in a private healthcare facility began to manifest symptoms similar to COVID-19 2 days after being discharged. Upon testing, he was confirmed positive and passed on a day later.
The information we receive from different quarters indicate that our people have started lowering their guard on COVID-19 protocols. I have it on good authority that traders in various markets no longer comply with the enforcement of wearing of face masks and washing of hands. I want to warn that we may consider shutting down specific markets if this trend is not halted immediately. I've also received similar reports from the churches and other religious groups in the state and mosques that most of them have discarded the wearing of face masks. I urge the leadership of religious bodies in Anambra State to ensure compliance with this standard of protocol of COVID-19 without further delays.
The management of the Niger Delta Development Commission says their late executive director, Ibanga Edhang, tested positive for COVID-19. The Rivers State Ministry of Health has written to the commission to confirm the cause of death as complications attributable to COVID-19. The ministry directed the commission and its management to go into self-isolation for 14 days, effective from today. The statement from the Corporate Affairs Department of the NDDC says the leadership of the Commission is working to trace staff and contractors who have had close contact with Mr. Enang. Meanwhile, the Commission wants the family to be left alone to mourn their loss in dignity. Ahead of a possible resumption of domestic flights, operators and vendors of auxiliary services in the aviation sector say the wait has been too long. Some of them who spoke to Channels Television on the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses say they are prepared for a possible resumption of business despite the reality of a new normal which may affect their bottom line. Our correspondent Olu Phillips reports.
When COVID-19 struck the world last year and continued the rampage in 2020, not many saw the extent of devastation it would have and has continued so. One after the other, economies started crumbling, with the aviation sector taking one of the heaviest fall. Nigeria isn't insulated as it takes a slice of the aviation slump. Our airport operations and ancillary services took a compulsory leave. Needless to count the losses incurred directly and indirectly, as we see empty car parks, airport taxis serving no one, relaxed traffic around the airport axis, all speak to the impact.
The impact has been huge. Since about 3 months. The entire system is been on lockdown. You have to continue to pay salaries. Your equipment, even though you are not running them, you cannot close down your facility totally. You have to continue to consume power, to run some basic systems and then keep items in place to ensure that in the event that you have to reopen, there will be just minimal things that you have to do.
Head or tail, governments around the world are applying multi-step approach and solution, and gradually there's been a reopening while the battle against COVID-19 continues. These folks can't wait to get their lives back and are in a hurry to forget the dry periods.
Opening on 21st is not going to be an issue to us. But what we pray is that the business should just pick up by His grace. Formerly, we do pick one front, 3 behind. But now it's 1 front, 2 behind because of social distance. And we have not increased any fare. We've increased any fare because when you do not see passenger, whom are you going to increase it for?
But it seems that resumption will be fraught with some battles with their hosts.
The management of funds, they are still telling us the 60,000 naira we do pay, we should come and pay them after this 1 month. When even now we are even looking for money to feed our family, to eat, not even the debt.
All eyes and attention is focused on a possible return to normalcy from the 21st of this month. What is, however, certain is that we won't travel or do things the way we used to. COVID-19 has introduced a new order.
President Muhammadu Buhari has met with the President of the Africa Development Bank, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, at the State House in Abuja. He promised to give him all the support he needs as President of the bank. President Buhari says Nigeria would work with all other leaders and stakeholders in the AFDB to ensure that Mr. Adesina is elected for a second term built on the record of his previous achievements. He said in a statement which reads in part, "In 2015, when you were to be elected for the first term, I wrote to all African leaders recommending you for the position. I didn't say because you were a People's Democratic Party minister and I belong to the All Progressives Congress, so I would withhold my support. I'll remain consistent with you because no one has faulted the step I took on behalf of Nigeria." The president's statement adds that the African Union has endorsed Mr. Adesina as sole candidate for the continent, but some other stakeholders are trying to ensure that Mr. Adesina is reinvestigated on some allegations and rendered ineligible to run. In part two, after the break, Senate approves President Muhammadu Buhari's external borrowing request, calls for stiffer punishment for rape and violation of girls in Nigeria. That's in a moment. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to review restrictions on interstate travel once approval for domestic flights is granted from June the 21st. Lagos State Government yet to decide whether or not to lift ban on religious gatherings, as Kaduna State Government insists mosques and churches will remain shut. House of Representatives calls for scrapping of excess crude account, makes slight adjustment to medium-term expenditure framework. President Muhammadu Buhari promises to support re-election of Akinwumi Adesina as president of the African Development Bank. And 6 police officers charged for using excessive force in Atlanta as world leaders weigh in on George Floyd murder protest. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Do subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or you can download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire TV, and Roku as well. Now, we have some images that were sent in to us on our Eyewitness portal. Let's take a look at the first set of images from a village in Ikorodu area of Lagos, showing what our Eyewitness describes as a situation of things following a very heavy downpour there. Still from Lagos State comes our next image, also showing a flooded community at Ayobo-Ayeturu, a border community between Lagos and Ogun States. Our Eyewitness says this is the experience every time it rains. We have the final image from Abule Iroko in Ogun State. Our Eyewitness reporter calls for any sort of help that could save the community from this type of challenge. For all your images, thanks a lot, and do send us some more. Federal lawmakers have made slight adjustments to the parameters in the medium-term expenditure framework, which was submitted by President Muhammadu Buhari. The lawmakers raised the benchmark price for crude oil from $25 to $28 per barrel and reduced the oil production output from 1.9 to 1.8 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is calling for the scrapping of the excess crude account, describing it as illegal. Our correspondent Terry Ikumi reports.
During Tuesday's plenary, lawmakers in the Green Chamber considered a number of reports. One of them was from the Committee on Finance on the revised 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework.
Unfortunately, we had set our benchmark price at $57 per barrel. Now that the price is about $38, we are proposing a $28 per barrel benchmark. Our production was on 2.18 million barrels per day before. It has now been cut down to 1.9, and we are still proposing 1.8 million barrels per day for this MTEC. The excess crude oil account, which has been maintained year in, year out, is scrapped because it is not in line with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Communication
to the House requesting...
The House then adopts the report of its committee for the approval of President Buhari's loan request of $22.798 billion, which was initially stood down in March because it did not capture the entire region of the country. The report is adopted, but not without the Speaker attempting to calm some aggrieved lawmakers.
And we met as leadership with the Minister of Finance for this bill yesterday. And I told her, this is the clause we're putting into this report. The Port Harcourt-Maiduguri Road must be a part of, or we will not consider any report, any borrowing plan if that is not included. And we got her word. I think a lot has gone into this. It has taken months, and I'm only seeking for the understanding of our colleagues from the Northeast and our colleagues from the Southeast.
Let's get down to the business of the day.
Meanwhile, in the Senate, lawmakers also debated the revised MTEF and FSP.
For us to even maintain this 360 exchange rate, we have to really work so hard and see where we can earn revenue generation other than this oil, because the oil has not been the one. The oil sector contribution is only 10% to the GDP.
Anytime you do a transaction, you will see 50 naira stamp duty. That money is not remitted. If they're remitting it, we'll be able to access more money from that.
The Senate also approved the external borrowing of $5.513 billion requested by President Buhari. The committee, however, recommends that a loan to fund federal government's priority projects and support for state governments be stood down because of the absence of sufficient details to guide the committee. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
The governor of Edo State, Governor Obaseki, has said he'll not leave the All Progressives Congress and is confident of triumph in spite of challenges. Mr. Obaseki told members of the group of Edo citizens resident in Abuja that the next election in Edo State is about leadership with intellectual energy to channel the state's youth resources into development.
We've given our people hope, and I'm happy that that hope is being reflected in your actions today, where on your own, you have decided to organize yourselves, to mobilize, to raise your own resources, to support a cause you believe in. For me, that is very humbling. I've chosen the party that brought me in the first place, the All Progressive Congress. No matter the challenges, I will run on the platform of my party. And I'm sure by the grace of God, I will overcome. Amen. They say it's a dirty game. We want to clean up our politics, so that more of you, quality people who have served this country in the various capacities, can also come into politics. The leadership space is yearning, it's crying for quality people to come and salvage this country. That is what I stand for. I am hoping that with my success in politics, a lot more professionals, a lot more people of good means, of people who mean well for their communities, will stand up to be counted.
We'll stay in Abuja, but here's Linda Akigbe. Linda?
Hello, Ijoma. The Senate is asking the federal government to embark on a campaign against rape and violation of girls in the country. This is in response to the rape and killing of Uwa Omozuwa, an undergraduate of the University of Benin, and also the killing of Tina Ezekwe by a policeman in Lagos. The Senate is also calling for the immediate arrest of the perpetrators. 14-year-old Tina Ezekwe fell from the bullets of a policeman in Lagos. Uwa Omozuwa raped and killed by yet-to-be-identified persons in Benin City, Edo State. 2 young girls killed within days of each other, tragedies which have become one too many in the country.
A 16-year-old girl
The federal lawmaker is concerned that cases of brutality and rape of girls are on the rise in the country, and his colleagues want stiffer punishment for rapists and sexual offenders.
Further aware that the girl child has become clearly endangered in Nigeria. Worried that our young girls may no longer have the confidence to live their normal lives. The average young girl in Nigeria is obviously becoming terrified and scared to live with and trust her close male relatives and neighbors.
If the authorities do not take serious action against rape, it will become a big scourge that will injure us down the line.
A 3-year-old baby was raped by a 44-year-old man. Mr. President, we have this everywhere in this country. Time has come when we need to change our criminal code and put a stringent punishment for rape in Nigeria.
The penal code prescribes a maximum of life imprisonment for rape. The Violence Against Persons Act, VAP, provides a minimum of 12 years and maximum of life for the same offences, while the Child Rights Act may be considered as prescribing the stiffest punishment, life imprisonment. But a number of states in Nigeria have refused to domesticate the Child Rights and the VAP Act, and some states who have domesticated it reduced the jail term to 10 years. In the meantime, the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Mohammed Adamu, has ordered the immediate transfer of the ongoing investigations into the sexual assault and death of Ms. Waila Omozua in Benin, Edo State, to the force headquarters in Abuja. The IGP's directive is sequel to the preliminary report from a team of investigators and forensic experts earlier deployed. Meanwhile, the IGP has deployed specialized investigators and additional investigation assets to the gender desk offices and the juvenile welfare centers across the country so the units can respond to increasing challenges of sexual assaults and gender-based violence and other social ills within the country. He also appealed to members of the public to assist the police with information that could aid investigations into cases of sexual assault and domestic gender-based violence across the country. To legal matters, the Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has ordered the release of a senator representing Abia North Senatorial District, Senator Orji Uzor Kalu, from the Kuje Correctional Center in Abuja. Justice Mohammed Liman ordered Senator Kalu's release today after listening to an application filed by the former governor seeking the setting aside of his conviction. Our judiciary correspondent Shola Shoyele reports that the anti-graft agency EFCC has been ordered to file documents for arraignment.
A lot of the courts here are not sitting, but Justice Mohammed Liman is sitting to consider an application filed by the former Abia State Governor, Senator Orji Kalu, seeking his release from custody. His counsel, Lateef Fagbemi SAN, told Justice Liman that the application, which is a fallout of the Supreme Court judgment of May 8, 2020, was made pursuant to Section 159 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. He asked the court to set aside the trial, conviction and prison sentence imposed on the former governor by Justice Mohammed Idris.
The proceedings leading to the conviction and sentence were quashed. Accordingly, on grounds that the law court lacked jurisdiction, since Honorable Justice Idris, who started the case as a High Court judge, judge of Federal High Court, got elevated before the conclusion of trial.
Counsel for the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Rotimi Jacobs, SAN, did not oppose the application.
We have been in this court for 12 years. So to wait for another 2 years to decide appeal, so that will be too dangerous for us. So that is why we took that informed decision that let us go on, let the court set it aside, let's call our witnesses.
In a summary judgment, Justice Liman held that the application was meritorious. He commended the EFCC prosecutor for saving the time of the court by not subjecting it to the rigors of listening to lengthy arguments of counsel. The judge then ordered that Senator Orji Kalu be set free. He also ordered the EFCC to file the necessary court papers for a fresh arraignment of the defendants, after which the date for trial will be communicated to all parties in the case. Shola Sheli, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returns, we have more updates on COVID-19, plus World Bank lists immediate steps for countries to recover from economic impact of COVID-19. That's in Business News. Join us again.
Welcome back to the news at 10. An Abuja High Court has discharged Senator Dino Melaye of the charges filed against him by the federal government over alleged false information. Justice Olasunbo Goodluck, in a ruling on no case submission filed before the court, held that the prosecution counsel failed to establish a prima facie case against him. Senator Melaye was alleged to have sometime in April 2017 deliberately given false information to the police to incriminate the former chief of staff to the Kaduna State Governor, Mr. Edward Onoja, as the mastermind of an assassination attempt on him. He was also alleged to have in April 2017 made a false statement in a phone conversation with one Muhammad Abubakar with the intention of harming the reputation of Mr. Onoja. Senator Melaye, however, pleaded not guilty to the charges. Renewed clashes between thieves and Jukun in Maraba town of Donga local government area in Taraba State have resulted in the death of a couple. The council chairman, Musa Nashuka, confirmed to Channels Television that 2 persons were killed on their farmlands by suspected bandits. The police public relations officer in the state, David Missel, also confirmed the incident, adding that security operatives have been deployed to the affected community to avoid a recurrence and any reprisals. Let's take a look at some business news now, and here's Anne Waudu.
Thanks a lot, Ijoma, and welcome to Business News. The World Bank has outlined immediate steps countries can take to speedily recover from the economic effects of COVID-19, which has dealt a devastating blow to the global economy. In a report released today, the president of the World Bank, David Malpass, explains that such steps include reforms that allow capital and labor to adjust relatively fast, reducing regulatory barriers, removing costly subsidies, monopolies, and protected state-owned enterprises that have slowed development. Malpass also mentioned the World Bank will work to limit the harm caused by the pandemic and help countries prepare for recovery so they can rebuild better and stronger than before. He, however, warns that the damage already caused by the pandemic and lockdowns could push over 60 million people into extreme poverty this year. The House of Representatives has rejected a motion seeking to suspend the implementation of the 7.5% value-added tax following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. That motion sought to ask the federal government to suspend the additional 2.5% VAT contained in the 2019 Finance Act until January the 1st, 2021, while all businesses should henceforth hold the charging of VAT directly from the consuming public. Now, while reacting to that motion, the lawmakers argued that since a 2.5% increase was already in the National Assembly Act, which has been signed into law, it cannot be suspended by a motion, but through a formal amendment bill. Nigeria joined its other OPEC Plus counterparts in April 2020 to bring into effect the agreement to cut 9.7 million barrels per day. That will correct the current situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timipre Silva, who made this known via Twitter, says that based on current data from the NNPC, Nigeria reduced its current production in May 2020 to 1.613 thousand barrels per day. The minister also explains that Nigeria has made concerted efforts to adhere to the commitment and it will continue to fully comply with that agreement. Nigeria's currency depreciated by 1.1% to 445 against the US dollar today at the parallel market, and that's compared with 441 at which it traded on Monday. Now, this comes after the federal government announced that airlines will resume flight operations on June the 21st. At the investors and exporters window, the local currency was flat at 385.5 against the dollar. Meanwhile, traders are saying that they are awaiting the resumption of foreign exchange sales by the central bank to BDC operators for business travels, personal travels, and other retail users, which will help stabilize the local currency, the naira. Now let's take a look at Nigeria's stock market. It has maintained positive posture for a second day in the new month of June. More bargain hunting activities by investors lifted overall value of listed equities higher by 48 billion naira today. Chimezi Obiwagu has the details.
Thank you and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Bargain hunting, that's the best description of today's activity at the equities market. It was a struggle between the bears and the bulls. Despite the efforts of the bears to pull the index down, the big boys like Dangote Cement, GT Bank and MTN Nigeria didn't allow that happen. And so we saw the index landing moderately again in the green by 0.27%. See the sector chart. It was more of red except the industrial. The banking sector closed marginally down because GT Bank shed a little weight from its initial gain at the close of market, and there weren't any corresponding banking stock to support it. However, traders say the performance of GT Bank yesterday and today may make the other stocks to rev up their performance by tomorrow. It's also important to note that in terms of sustainability of value and dividend returns, the high cap stocks are more reliable. Let's look at the activity chart. Over 6 billion naira realized today. The value there tells you the level of confidence in the market despite all odds. In fact, this moderate upward trend seen since yesterday gladdens the heart of traders. They expect to see improvement as the week rolls by. And that was the Stock Market Report. I'm Chimezi Obi Iwago.
Thank you, Chimezi. Major global markets have closed today's session positive across board despite civil unrest in the United States. Traders are now focusing more attention on the reopening of the world's biggest economy. Let's see the closing numbers for today. Thanks for watching Business News Tonight. I'm Anne Nwawadu. The rest of the news at 10 continues now with Ijoma.
Thanks a lot, Anne. The Edo State Governorship Election Petitions Tribunal sitting in Abuja has ordered the state's deputy governor to appear before it on Thursday, June the 4th, to produce the original copy of his NYSC discharge certificate. The tribunal's order is in furtherance of a subpoena earlier issued on him to appear and produce the original of the exemption certificate issued to him in 1998 by the National Youth Service Corps. The subpoena was issued at the request of the candidate of the Liberation Movement in the November the 16th, 2019 governorship election in Bayelsa, Vijay Opwama, who is challenging his qualification to stand election, alleging that he submitted a forged exemption certificate to INEC. The tribunal's chairman, Justice Ibrahim Sirajo, immediately struck out the motion and ordered the senator to appear before it on Thursday. The tribunal rejected his lawyer's request that he be allowed to appear next week on the grounds that since Edo State does not have an airport, it will be difficult for the deputy governor to travel in view of the lockdown. Still ahead on the news at 10, 6 police officers charged for using excessive force in Atlanta as the world leaders weigh in on George Floyd's murder protest. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the news at 10. Former Vice President and Democratic ticket contender Mr. Joe Biden has condemned President Donald Trump's handling of the protests over police brutality and racial injustice. He believes that Trump has turned the country into a battlefield. In his first formal speech out in public since the coronavirus halted the campaign trail in mid-March, Mr. Biden delivered perhaps his closest approximation yet of a presidential address to the nation. He emphasized themes of empathy and unity to draw a clear contrast with Mr. Trump, who over the last 24 hours threatened to deploy the military nationwide to dominate protesters. Here's Simon Pusey with more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London for your international news around the world in 5. US President Donald Trump has threatened to deploy heavily armed soldiers and law enforcement to stop violence in cities across the country after nearly a week of protests that were sparked by the death of African-American George Floyd. 4 police officers have been shot and injured during unrest in St. Louis in Missouri. Meanwhile, in New York, the iconic department store Macy's was broken into and a Nike store was looted, while other shop fronts and bank windows were smashed. Australia has announced it is investigating a US police attack on 2 Australian journalists outside the White House, with the foreign minister expressing strong concern about the assault caught live on camera.
My fellow Americans.
After being criticised for his silence on the worsening crisis, Donald Trump gave a nationwide address from the White House garden as police fired tear gas on peaceful protesters outside the fence.
First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled.
Meanwhile, politicians across Africa have condemned the killing of George Floyd. The former Beninese president, Nicéphore Soglo, said enough is enough, while Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo tweeted, "We hope the tragic death of George Floyd will inspire a lasting change in how America confronts the problems of hate and racism." Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has accused foreign governments of double standards in their reaction to Beijing's plans to impose national security laws on the city, pointing to anti-police brutality protests in the US. Lam has said that US President Donald Trump's plans to end the city's special trading status with the US in response to China's security law would be self-defeating. She took aim at the Trump administration for its own response to racial justice protests across the United States. India has begun preparations to face a cyclone that is expected to hit the country's west coast on Wednesday. It is expected to make landfall near India's financial capital of Mumbai and will put pressure on emergency services already struggling with the coronavirus outbreak. Last month, a powerful cyclone in the eastern state of West Bengal caused damage of $13 billion to infrastructure and crops and killed more than 100 people in India and Bangladesh. The World Food Programme has warned that an already fragile food security situation in eastern Africa is being threatened by a gridlock at borders amid coronavirus restrictions. At Kenya's border with Uganda, a queue of lorries stretched 60 kilometres long. Uganda started imposing restrictions at borders after incoming drivers from Kenya and Tanzania tested positive for COVID-19 in April. Yet these measures have doubled the time it takes for goods to travel across the region. A live streaming TV show has provided medical workers in Africa with the opportunity to have real-time interactions with Chinese experts.
COVID-19.
During the interaction, Chinese doctors share their experiences in treating the virus and answer questions from online viewers. All the medical workers in Africa who have participated have spoken highly of the experience and have said they have learned new measures on how to deal with the virus. Meanwhile, hospitals in Rwanda have deployed anti-epidemic robots in a bid to minimise contact between patients infected with the coronavirus and medical workers.
Hello, I am ready to use. I am at your service.
These robots, donated by the United Nations Development Programme, have carried out simple tasks like taking temperatures, monitoring patients and delivering video messages and feedback between doctors and patients. France has rediscovered its cafes and restaurants after 10 weeks of closures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, with clients savouring coffees and croissants on sunny terraces in the French capital, Paris. With the number of new infections from the virus declining, France's government has ruled that from Tuesday, restaurants and bars could reopen and the ban on travelling over 100 kilometres could be lifted. A similar story has played out in the Spanish capital, Madrid, where residents have enjoyed outdoor activities as the country emerged from its coronavirus lockdown after almost 3 months. And finally, a Romanian shoemaker from the Transylvanian city of Cluj has come up with the idea of long-nosed leather shoes to help keep people apart and respect the rules of social distancing. The shoemaker, Grigor Lup, has said that if two people wearing his size 75 shoes face each other, there would be an almost 1.5 metre distance between them. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Very interesting there. Move on to some sports now. Here's Olumide Macaulay.
Yes, Ijoma, that was a pretty long shoe. Welcome to Sports News. Super Eagles forward Victor Osimhen has been voted Lille's Player of the Season in the French League One. He won the award for the club, it says, ahead of Benjamin Andre of France and Portugal's Renato Sanchez. The 21-year-old, who is in his first season with Lille, scored 18 goals along with assists in 38 games across all competitions. Osimhen finished the curtailed French league season as the fourth top scorer, tied with PSG superstar Neymar. Only Moussa Sow with 19 goals and Nicolas Pepe with 17 have scored more than Osimhen after 28 match days in the last 40 seasons for Lille. Premier League clubs have been given the go-ahead to play friendly matches ahead of the planned resumption of the 2019-2020 season. Venues must be no more than 90 minutes away, and players must travel in their own cars to and from fixtures while wearing the kits they will play in. The referees and assistants are yet to be tested for COVID-19 for now, so club coaching staff will officiate matches. The Premier League is provisionally due to restart on Wednesday, June the 17th. Away from football, Floyd Mayweather Jr. will pay for the funeral expenses of George Floyd, the African-American whose death in Minneapolis by the police has prompted protests across the United States. The CEO of Mayweather Promotions confirmed the boxer's involvement in a statement, with several local media reports saying the family have accepted his offer. Floyd's funeral will be held in his hometown of Houston on June the 9th. Mayweather also paid for the funerals of a former opponent, Genaro Hernandez, and legendary Joe Frazier in 2011. Basketball Hall of Famer Wes Unseld, who led the Washington Wizards to their only NBA championships, has died at age 74 after a series of health issues, most recently pneumonia. His family announced his death via a statement released by the team, the franchise he was with throughout his entire 13-season playing career. He was chosen as one of the 50 greatest players, also worked for Washington as a coach and general manager. He was a 5-time All-Star and is one of the only 2 players to win the NBA Rookie of the Year and the MVP honors in the same season. He averaged 10.8 points and 14 rebounds for his NBA career and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in his first year in 1988. Finally, Rugby Australia is in talks with the government about allowing New Zealand, South Africa and Argentina teams to enter the country for a condensed rugby championship later in the year. After a 2-month lockdown to contain COVID-19, Australian authorities have allowed sports to restart domestic competition, but international fixtures remain in doubt due to travel restrictions and border controls.
We're working with our SANZAR partners around what the TRC looks like, and it is condensed. That said, everybody is committed to try to play a full TRC, and we're exploring with the Australian government whether that can be hubbed here in Australia. and we fly in all of the SANZAR partners, and they are in a training bubble, and then we can quarantine effectively and then play a competition. So that's what we're exploring. There will be an extended Bledisloe Cup, and we're well advanced with our discussions with our New Zealand colleagues on that.
And that's it on sports news. Ijoma, back to you.
Finally, and on a rather sad note, reggae music icon Majek Odumi Fasheke, popularly known as Majek Fashek, has died. According to his manager Omenka Uzoma, Majek died at the age of 57. The singer, who became popular for hits such as Send Down the Rain, So Long, Too Long and many others, died in New York after a protracted battle with cancer. He had earlier been hospitalized at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in London in November 2019. The songwriter and guitarist enjoyed a music career that spanned over 3 decades and was known to have worked with several international artists. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family. And the main news again, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to review restrictions on interstate travel once approval for domestic flights are granted from June the 21st. That's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do stay safe and good night.